Sports, a bridge that brings people together. And here in the Commonwealth, it's no different. From the gridiron to the hardwood and beyond, we all have a team we love to talk about. Now for the teams you care about, here's Heartland Sports Live with Trevor Rice.
And welcome into Heartland Sports Live on 106.1 ESPN Radio, 1400 AM this afternoon. Also live streaming with ESPN Radio 1061.com. Hey, it's Trevor Rice as we get set to talk some area sports, even though there's not much to talk about with the whole shutdown of sports here recently. I have Zach Newton, who joined me during the 5th Region Boys Basketball Tournament, joining me here in segment 2 of the show. We're going to make some stuff up in segment 3 today as we wrap up the hour. But first, joining me is Ryan Lemon of Kentucky Sports Radio. Ryan, how did you get through the weekend with no sports to watch?
Isn't it crazy? I mean, this is the time of year that we crave and live for. Man, this is March Madness, where if you're a basketball guy, this is it. And there's nothing. And it was kind of surreal. I was with some of my friends this weekend at a baby shower, of all things. We're like sitting around just kind of looking at each other like, my gosh, what are we going to do when we go home? I guess we're going to have to reintroduce ourselves to our wives and like, hey, honey, hi, my name's Ryan. You remember me? Because there's no basketball to go home and watch anymore.
Yeah, and that's what you guys thrive off of this time of year and really fill your content of your show with, as we have Ryan Lemon of Kentucky Sports Radio on with us right now. No basketball. Of course, they ended the SEC tournament earlier last week, and then, of course, all the other tournaments announcing their cancellations of games. And the NCAA came out and said, well, there's no big dance either. And so what does that mean for not only guys like you who have to put on these shows, but I guess just the players and everything moving forward? That has to be demoralizing, right?
Well, especially for the seniors, these guys and gals who, that realization they put on that uniform for the last time unexpectedly. Like I after they made the announcement, I saw some tweets from the UK women's basketball players are like, wow, I guess I played my last game and I didn't even know it. They didn't get to experience it. That reality kind of set in. And, Nate Sestina, who transfers to Kentucky to play in the NCAA basketball tournament and to experience March Madness, he didn't even get to play in the SEC tournament. I feel bad for those guys, and they didn't get to experience all that. And it's sad because they're never going to get that back. They're not going to they're not going to redo the NCAA tournament. I think there's a chance maybe they might get to play baseball. The seniors might get to, the college seniors might get to play baseball and softball maybe in May. But these guys from March Madness, it's done. They're never going to get a chance to play in that postseason. Now for us, to answer your question. We're our show. We're used to it. We spend most of May and the summer shows hardly talking about sports anyway. Some of these other shows we were talking about today, man, I don't know. They're not used to it. They're going to have to find a way to fill their shows with talking about other stuff. We do, food brackets and take our show on the road, and we're not even a sports show, so we'll be fine. We've been kind of getting ready for this moment for years, not having sports to talk about. But other shows, I think they're going to have to find a way to do it. And it's like last night. Matt Jones had to do 4 hours of ESPN radio on Saturday and 4 hours of ESPN radio on Sunday, and they only talk about sports. He was saying, look, they don't want you talking about, hey, what's going on at the Golden Corral in E-Town. On a Saturday night. They don't want that, talking about the new Shoney's in E-Town. They want you to only talk about sports. He's like, man, I don't know what these shows are going to do now for the next couple months when there's no sports to talk about.
It's interesting you bring up restaurants because Governor Beshear earlier today announcing that as of 5 p.m., which we are in the 5 o'clock hour now, that there will be no in-person dining at these restaurants. You have to get carry-out, the drive-through, or you can have your food delivered. So restaurants, and I know KS Bar over there pretty popular in Lexington, and of course we have a bunch of restaurants here locally who are very popular. How much is this impacting us locally?
Well, it's going to be huge when you think about those waitresses and those bartenders who depend on that money and that tip money to make their rent payment coming up on April 1st, and especially during this month. I mean, every restaurant and every bar was budgeting to have a big month of March to help cover the expenses that are coming up in the slow months of April, May, and June and July. March carries us through the next couple months, and now that's gone. And then those waitresses and those bartenders, they're the same way. They make so much money in 1 month, it carries them for a while. And they were counting on this money to, like I said, make their rent payment here in a couple weeks. And now that's gone. So the economic impact that this is going to have is very, very sad. A lot of them have kids. Okay, how are they going to feed their children now with this money being gone? So if you sit and think about it, it'll make you cry that this is a time that we've not seen in our lifetime. Our parents have gone through times like this, but a lot of us have not seen a time like this. Where now all of a sudden, a lot of our friends, Trevor, are going to have to go to the unemployment line for the first time in their lives, and just to get money to pay food to feed their kids. And I know the governor said they're going to make unemployment a lot easier and attainable for people now in this situation, which is good because it's a reality check for a lot of us. This is the lives they're going to be, because nobody's going to be hiring people. People are going to not have jobs. The restaurants and bars closing. They're not going to have jobs to go to. There's no other jobs for people to go to anymore. They've got to go get unemployment just to get money, just to feed their kids, just to have food for themselves. Maybe just to make a rent payment, just have a place to live.
Yeah, no, you're very right on that. Ryan Lemon of Kentucky Sports Radio joining us here on Heartland Sports Live. So there's no big dance, no basketball games. So I guess one takeaway from this year's Kentucky team would be, Ryan?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Your big takeaway. My takeaway, that's a good question. My big takeaway from this team was that they really surprised me. That their record in the SEC is one of Calipari's best records that he's had. Obviously, the undefeated team, the John Wall team, the 2012 team had better records. But I think this is his fourth best record he's had ever in the SEC. And who would have thought it was going to be this team? The way the season started, losing to Evansville and losing to those two games out in Las Vegas. So I think this team really is going to end up, I would say my big takeaway was they just surprised me the way that they were able to win so many games in the SEC. Maybe it's because people are going to say the SEC was down. College basketball was down this year. But Emmanuel quickly went from a guy who averaged 5 points a game last year, didn't even start when the season started, ends up being SEC Player of the Year. I mean, that's such a great story. Nick Richards comes back for his junior year, and at one time was the leading candidate to be SEC Player of the Year. I mean, that's a great story. So, I mean, there were some great storylines this year on this basketball team that I'm really going to remember fondly for sure.
Had there been a bracket, how far do you think this team would have gone?
Yeah, that's the topic we're going to talk about all this summer. I think, NCAA tournaments are, if you have good guard play, you can go a long way. And those three guards, man, they could have carried this team a long way. Now, how Ashton Hagen was going to respond, Ashton Hagen's last two games, think about that, his last two games, he got into a fight with John Calipari in the Tennessee game and refused to go play. And then he got suspended and didn't even play in the Florida game. So how was he going to respond from that? We're never going to know. Was he going to come back more clear-headed and play well? or was he going to come back and be the Ashton Hagans we saw in the month of February that was kind of out of control at times and made some bad decisions? Who knows? I would like to think that suspension was going to get him back on the right track and come back clear-headed, and those three guards could have carried this team a long way. Now, do I think they could have made a Final Four? I don't know. I don't know if they could have done that, but I think they could have made a deep run maybe to an Elite Eight, and then of course, anything can happen. Who would have ever thought that Brandon Knight team would have gone to a Final Four after the way that their regular season could have gone, or the Twins their freshman year, they went to the national championship game that year, the way their regular season went. So, if you're asking me what I would have predicted, I would have definitely predicted an Elite Eight. But maybe not a Final Four.
Looking at the players, and again, Kentucky's been one of those teams where you're always looking at players going to the next level, playing in the NBA. How much is put into their profile from the tournament? How much do these players depend on the big dance, this big tournament, to really dictate whether or not they go and jump up to that next level?
Well, a lot of guys, it makes a lot, and I think Ashton Hagans probably, like I said, the way his season ended, he needed a good tournament to help his draft status. I think Quickly is definitely, he's gone. Nick Richards is gone. But I think Hagans needed a tournament to kind of get back in good standing with the NBA guys, even though I think he is gone anyway. Quickly's gone, even though I think a lot of people think he may come back. I think in his mind, he has thought he was going to leave anyway, so I think he's gone. So I think those four guys are probably definitely leaving. But I think E.J. Montgomery's another guy that, to answer your question, if he had a really good tournament, the way he had played late in the year, he's another guy that maybe could have tested the NBA waters, which everybody does now, could have got some really good feedback, and could have maybe thought about leaving this year. Maybe would have been, maybe a second-round pick. Could have got enough feedback from some teams that could have thought, you know what, I'm going to do this based on good play in the tournament. Now, the other argument about him is, look what Nick Richards did coming back for his third year, his junior year. Look what happened to him. And that's what Calipari is going to preach to EJ. Look, you come back for your third year. Look at the big jump Nick Richards made. That could be you next year, EJ. And trust me, this team needs EJ next year. They got loaded guards coming in, but they need another big guy. They need EJ. So I think they'll lose the four guys, but I think EJ will come back.
Ryan Lemon of Kentucky Sports Radio joining us here on Heartland Sports Live. So let's go ahead and look to the coming weeks now for you guys. It sounds like you guys are going to be in isolation mode now too. With Kentucky Sports Radio, what does the show look like here? Because obviously we've already established there's not going to be much sports-wise to go on, which you guys have pretty much prepared yourselves for. So what can we expect with KSR here in the coming days and weeks?
It'll be like our summer shows where there's no topic that goes crazy, that goes that's untouchable. Matter of fact, Matt reached out to the listeners today and said, hey, just send us a topic, just any topic you want us to talk about. And he's literally going to put them in a bucket of topics, and Shannon the dude's just going to pull a topic out of the bucket tomorrow. Bucket of topics. And Drew and I will have no idea what even is in the bucket. Matt's going to be in Louisville from here on out. They sent equipment home with me today, Trevor, where I'm going to do all the shows from my house. They don't even want me going in the building tomorrow. So it's going to be like our standard summer shows, which literally could go off the rails. I mean, we'll have to obviously be serious under the situation we're in at times. We're talking about the news stories of the day. But the rest of the times we'll try to, maybe have some humor and let some people have a little, enlighten their day a little bit under our stressful situations we're in, and have these crazy topics and have some fun for a couple hours, and let some people maybe not be so stressed out with what other situations we're involved with in our day-to-day lives right now.
Here's my question for Ryan Lemon. The equipment they gave you, are you capable of hooking it up and getting on air tomorrow?
A little trade secret between you and me. usually most of the time, I am also the tech guy, believe it or not. Like when we set up these remotes, like at KS Bar and Grill, who's the guy that sets it up? Me, believe it or not. So, yeah, I can set it up. Now, whether our signal's strong enough sometimes for my house, that may be a question, but yeah, I'm the guy that's going to be setting it up, and just keep your fingers crossed if the signal's strong enough for us to stay on the air.
One of your tweets that made me laugh was you just simply saying, "I'm out," when they initially announced that Lexington had its first case of coronavirus announced. What was going on in your head at that point?
It just shocked. It's just that reality check. You know, you think it's on a cruise ship out in the Pacific Ocean. You're like, okay, and it's in Seattle, Washington. Yeah, okay, it's still out there. And then all of a sudden it says it's in Cynthiana, Kentucky. I'm like, what? You know, how did it get from Seattle to Cynthiana, Kentucky? It's like, it's just a huge reality check. Like, it's here. All right, wake up. We ain't messing around no more. There ain't no joking around on the radio. It's here. It's knocking on your door, and you better take precautions. And then, you know, now there's like, what, 6 or 7 cases in Cynthiana, 6 or 7 cases in Fayette County, 6 or 7 cases in Jefferson County, and every day you turn the news on, there's just more and more cases being confirmed in Kentucky. And then we've had our first death in Kentucky now reported, the guy that had it in Bourbon County. So it's reality check. So when I first saw that in Cynthiana, I'm like, you know, it's just like that reality check, like, oh my gosh, you know, it's here. There ain't no messing around, there ain't no more joking around. It's here. It's on our back door, and we better start being serious about it.
The most important question I'll ask you here during this segment, Ryan, do you have enough toilet paper? Do the Lemons have toilet paper?
We don't. We don't. And when I'm done talking to you, I'm sitting right now in the Meijer parking lot. I'm going in and hoping and praying that a truckload of it has arrived. And if not, I'm going store shopping today around town, just trying to find. I've got a list of stuff I need to do, and of course, toilet paper is on the list. Toilet paper, dog food, you know, milk, you know, the stuff that you're supposed to get when you hunker down and be in quarantine for a couple of days. But I don't get the toilet paper thing. I mean, I really don't understand. This is not a stomach virus. Why is everybody buying toilet paper? I don't get it. Somebody explain it to me. Why does everybody think you got to buy toilet paper for this virus? It's a respiratory virus. It's not a stomach virus. I don't know.
The thing that I find interesting about this whole toilet paper thing is when you really do need toilet paper, which it sounds like you do. I needed it on Wednesday, so I went to a store to get some toilet paper. You almost feel a little bit of guilt going in there and buying toilet paper because of the fact that you really do need it, but everybody looks at you as one of these crazy people who just does not understand what's going on.
Yeah. When you need it because you're out at your house, like, oh, you're one of those people who think you have to go get it because of the coronavirus. You don't understand. No, I don't have any at my house. I need some.
Ryan Lemon of Kentucky Sports Radio joining us here on Heartland Sports Live. Ryan, it's always fun. It's going to be interesting how you guys do your show here over the next several days and weeks moving forward as far as that goes. I guess we're going to continue to wait and see how much more this is going to evolve. Of course, restaurants now, that's going to be impacted. And heck, we just never know. Unfortunately, we've had one death, as you just said, in the state. Hopefully no more, but we'll just continue to keep an eye on it and continue to check out your show weekdays 10 until noon here on 106.1 ESPN Radio.
Yeah, good luck to you guys, too, with your show. I know it's tough. We all have to do our job right now, but yeah, good luck to you guys, man, and call me anytime. Be glad to talk to you, Trevor.
All right, Ryan, appreciate your time. You take it easy.
See you, man.
Heartland Sports Live rolls on after this. I will have Zach Newton, who joined me during the 5th Region Boys Basketball Tournament, in the studio with me, coming up right after the break on 106.1 ESPN Radio.
Glorious! No, I won't give in till I'm victorious. And I will defend.
And welcome back into Heartland Sports Live on 106.1 ESPN Radio 1400 AM, and we are live streaming this afternoon with ESPN Radio 1061.com. Ryan Lemon of Kentucky Sports Radio joining us in the last segment. Now I have Zach Newton, who joined me during the 5th Region Boys Basketball Tournament, in the studio with me, and we're going to be talking about everything that happened in the 5th Region Tournament. We can't talk about anything that happened over the weekend because, well, there wasn't anything, Zach, happening over the weekend. So we got to go back to Tuesday in the championship game. It was E-Town and Bardstown, and we'll talk about what led up to that championship game. But welcome, and I just want to first of all say you did a phenomenal job doing in the analyst role for the entire tournament. Your first time ever doing it on air. So I want to say, first of all, you did a fantastic job in doing that.
Thank you.
And welcome to the show.
Well, it's good to be here. It's really good to be anywhere besides my house, which is apparently the only place I'm legally allowed to be.
Yes, of course. Today, Governor Beshear putting a ban at, well, we're in that period now, 5 p.m., after 5 p.m., where you can't go and sit in a restaurant to eat. You have to officially go through the drive-thru, takeout, or you have to order, have it delivered to your door.
Well, yeah. Well, we've got Grubhub and stuff now, so I mean that's not as bad, is it? Like it used to be, like if you want a delivery, well, it's pizza. You're getting pizza, or maybe Chinese if you lived in town. But now there's options available, so it's less terrible than it used to be.
Now there is options, and 2020 is officially
what a time
better
to be alive
when it comes to food. Just not everything else right now, apparently, with what's going on in the world. No sports. I don't know how some of these other guys are doing it right now. But let's talk about this 5th Region Boys Basketball
Absolutely.
Tournament. Because it doesn't look like for the foreseeable future we're going to be talking about a boys Sweet 16 tournament with how everything's been turning out, so we can at least relive the moments of that championship game, what got us there. First of all, what stood out in this year's 5th Region tournament? Great venue, great hosting town, but what stood out in this year's 5th Region Boys Basketball Tournament to you?
Jaquias Franklin in the second half of basketball games. That's a big one. He took over the championship game in a profound way. That really stood out to me. I was skeptical of JJ Traynor, and credit to Boo Brewer for getting his kids ready and making the championship run, or the run to the championship game that they made too. I was skeptical of JJ Traynor going in because in the John Harden game where I got to see him up close, and the King of the Bluegrass game, I didn't see a lot of perimeter shooting from him. Like 10 feet and in, he's great because he's 6'9", and he can jump into space. And when you have that kind of athleticism and height in high school, you're going to be borderline unstoppable. But he really showed up and showed me a lot in the John Harden game, helping break the press some in the second half and getting really involved and scoring the way he did and hitting jump shots the way he did. I really saw what I guess Chris Mack saw the potential that he would have from him. The Preston Merle buzzer beater was great to send that Bardstown game to overtime. Healthy concern for my life because we broadcasted from the Bardstown side of the gym when he hit that, and I thought, well, if they lose this game, there's going to be a riot. I think you thought that as well. I had a lot of fun just doing it. I told my wife, she was like, why are you driving to Camelsville every night? And I was just like, look, I told my parents this is what I wanted to be and I didn't want to be an astronaut. I wanted to call live sports for radio or TV. So I was like, I am just a 30-year-old man living his childhood dream. And so that whole experience was a lot of fun. Thanks for letting me have that.
You're very welcome, and you handled it well. And your puns, your jokes in the middle of ball games made it even better, especially with just how some of those games went. And typically tournaments you're looking at having blowouts. We had blowout victories in that one, but you also have games that come down to the last minutes, and we had those, especially that championship game. John Harden Bardstown, that was a thriller going into overtime. The only overtime game that we had in this year's 5th Region Boys Basketball Tournament. But I would say what stood out to me was E-Town coming in here preseason. Everyone was saying they were maybe the 4th best team in this 5th region, and they came out on top. They had a chip on their shoulder, and oh yeah, by the way, they returned 4 of their 5 starters again next year.
Yeah, they're going to be a predicament for pretty much everybody. I'd say in the state. If this is James Hare's swan song, and you got to start considering the big picture. He's been coaching for a long time. He's getting a little older. You got to how many more teams like this are you going to have? But the thing about that, I hope he coaches forever. But this would be probably a great note for him to go out on, bringing 4 of those 5 kids back. They're going to have to find some size. But with the way that those 4 guards play, and you get the other Sherrard back into the starting rotation, you're going to start 5 guards. You're going to just run everybody to death probably. But they're going to get what John Harden has had this year that maybe they didn't have, because the John Harden, the undefeated regular season where they lost to Campbell County, they were supposed to be like the 5th best team in the region. Like, nobody thought that they would do what they did. And then E-Town kind of did that this year. They reeled off that big, long, undefeated run until they ran into Butler in the Nathan McCurry Classic. And they did all this stuff, not necessarily against all odds, because anybody who'd watch those kids play as sophomores would be like, they're going to be really good. But they made that big run free of the burden of expectation of making a big run. Now they're going to have to play with a giant target on their backs, because they're going to be everybody's UK. The way they talk about UK in the SEC, where it's everybody's national championship game. It's everybody's Super Bowl. That's E-Town next year. And people like beating E-Town anyway for a whole bunch of reasons, which we could do a whole show about if you really wanted to. But they're going to have a huge target on their back next year, bringing all those kids back, adding Cam Sherrard back to the lineup. It'll be interesting to see what happens.
The thing about basketball is always interesting to me is just the fact that you never know who's going to upset who. And you feel like, in a way, Bardstown did that to John Harden, but I don't know if necessarily we can... The way that they played each other in the regular season meeting, where Bardstown was up big, and they just let it slip away there in that second half. I don't know if anybody necessarily was surprised that Bardstown beat John Harden. Just for the fact in the first meeting what we saw, and the fact that the size that Bardstown had, you knew that they could compete with the athleticism that John Harden had.
Well, they did a lot in the Bardstown game to take away a lot of the weapons that John Harden brings to the table. You're not going to win many games when 4 of the best players on the floor that night, or 3 of the 4 best players on the floor that night, are on one team. And they were on Bardstown against John Harden in that second game. In the first game, you got to go back and now wonder, well, how much did Bardstown give away? You know, they had a lot of turnovers in the second half. The press caught up to them. Alex Matthews racked up a bunch of steals. I mean, they did a lot of sloppy stuff in the second half. And I get to sit close enough to the away bench at boys basketball games that I can hear a lot of the frustration from coaches. And Boo was frustrated the game at John. We were, in the upper level of the gym, but you didn't see that same frustration. There were a couple plays where he was upset when they let things get closer, but you didn't see that kind of frustration from him. And that indicates to me that the first game wasn't necessarily a fluke, because John was really good. I don't think anybody would take that away from them. But giving up the big lead the way Bardstown did, there was something fluky to that maybe. But in terms of this, I didn't see that game as an upset. And I mean, I know the John kids. I sit there every home game. Like, I'm a fan. But going into that game, if you were like, who's the team in the region tournament that could knock John out, I'd have told you Bardstown. And with no hesitation.
So let me ask you this. Going into that championship game, if you are Elizabethtown, you take care of LaRue County by 30 in that first semifinal game, and then you're E-Town, you're sitting over there on the far side away from us during that second game. Who do you think they would rather face in that situation, knowing that you have Bardstown and John Harden coming up? Do you want a rematch, a fourth match game against John Harden, or do you think you're matched up favorably against a Bardstown team, or does it matter at that point that you're just kind of focused? You just need to make your shots in that championship game, regardless of who you're facing, to win. I
don't think you get the luxury of planning in tournament basketball. I think if I was E-Town, I'd have rather played Bardstown, because John had not only beaten you, the last 2 times that you'd played them, they had dismantled you. The district championship was ugly for E-Town. And they got back in the second meeting, the meeting at John, they got back into it in the second half. But I think a lot of that was kind of like that Bardstown John game. John let them back in. I think if you're E-Town, you'd rather play Bardstown because, A, you've beaten them already. And I know you beat John, but you beat them at home. And you've, in a 50-50 split gym, which is how I'd look at the district championship. And we could have a whole conversation about how John's fans don't turn out the way you'd think they would for a team that's historically, over the last 4 or 5 years, been as good as they are. E-Town fans go everywhere. It's a 50-50 split gym. Yeah, it's John's court, but it might as well be neutral. You've got a loud student body presence that you've been afforded by it being a neutral site game, even though it's at John. And they got undressed in front of that crowd. It was bad. But that second game, I'd rather play, or that championship game, I'd rather play Bardstown because you've already beaten them. So you know at least some semblance of the formula. You know what you have to do. Because all the things that E-Town did to beat John in the game at Charlie Rawlings, I feel like they did in the other games, and it just wasn't enough. And you can credit that to John getting better, or John doing things differently, or whatever you want to. If I'm James Hare, I think Bardstown was the matchup I wanted.
And the thing that's interesting about that Elizabethtown Bardstown match is the first half they were down, but it was only by 3 points or something at the half, and they only made 1 3-pointer in that first half. E-Town did. Yeah,
Bardstown, to their credit, played well. They didn't get far enough ahead. You kind of knew in the back of your mind that E-Town barrage was coming. You just didn't know when. And then Jaquias Franklin starts pulling from sponsor logos, 8 feet from midcourt. And you're just like, well, we're here. This is happening now. And at that point, it almost seemed inevitable. Once he got going, there was not going to be anything that Bardstown could do to keep up.
That third quarter, you can say, was the defining moment for Elizabethtown to not only pull ahead, but really help them moving forward from that point on to keep the victory in check at that point, just because it seemed like it was the quarter was dominated by Jaquias Franklin. I mean, we keep saying his name, but he literally took over, just like in the second half of their game just before that. Took over the second half against LaRue County, and he took over that third period against Bardstown.
Oh, he's your 20, and I know this is a long time away. He's your 2020-2021 Fifth Region preseason player of the year. There's no doubt. He's unbelievable. Even with John Harding, they added Anthony Bowen, who's a raw talent. But with time to settle into that system, I think he'll be really good. Jaquias Franklin is unbelievable. There's things about his game mechanically that I said on broadcast of the tournament that I don't love, that I still don't love. But you can't deny the talent is there. You got to make him, I think, a little more vocal as a leader as a senior, because he's your star. There's no doubt. The Sherrard twins are great. Camden Williams is good. You lose Miles Fields. Alondre Murphy's not bad. But none of them are going to give you what Franklin's going to give you. He's got to be out in front, kind of leading the troops. The biggest compliment that I can give Alex Matthews, that plays for John, is he's a very vocal on-floor leader. He's a coach on the floor. He's an extension of Coach McCurry out there. He's emotive. You need some more of that out of Franklin. He's not like the guy that can. He's not going to be your J.R. Smith or your Lance Stevenson type of guy who maybe messes with people and gets in their heads. He's your star. You need him to be LeBron or Russell Westbrook or one of those guys. You need him to be that vocal leader. And I hope he steps up and does that, because they've got a ton of potential next year. They would have had this is just such a weird historical footnote that due to a virulent disease, we're not going to have a state tournament this year. So there will be no 2020 state championship. I don't think they would have won a state title. I think they would have run into one of the metro schools like Covcath or Mail's absurd this year. I saw Mail playing King of the Bluegrass, and they're unbelievable. And that was without their best player. E-Town would have run into one of them and probably got beat by 15 or 20 just because they wouldn't have had the size and strength to keep up. Because eventually running 4 guards and Miles Fields, who's an undersized center, played great in the region tournament, not take away from his work over the late part of the season. I don't think they would have won a state title, but they'd have made a run. They'd have easily been a Final Four team in the state just by virtue of the draw. Because as good as Ashland Blazer might have been, they didn't play a ton of people. And I think if they run into somebody like E-Town, or especially when they hit a Louisville school, that win streak would have ended.
Now, last I knew, they had suspended the tournaments. They didn't officially cancel them. They still may try to make those up, but we'll see how all that goes down. Right now, it doesn't look like anything's going to be made up at this point. But if you are a player, and we saw this in the KHSAA Sweet 16 tournament with the girls' side last week, where they told teams, "Look, you can't play this game. You got to go home." Girls were in tears, and of course, for seniors, this was going to be their final moments, at the high school level, and now they get that taken away from them. If you are like a Miles Fields, who this is the first time you get to the boys' Sweet 16 tournament, I mean, how do you feel about it?
I hate it for these kids. I understand completely why they're doing it. I get it. It doesn't make it any better. The understanding of this is a common sense decision. Like, we need to take care of each other and take care of people in these troublesome times. I get that. It sucks for these kids. It sucks for the college kids that don't get to play in there, because these kids, a lot of these kids aren't going to play in college. A lot of college athletes aren't going to go pro. This is the end of it for them, and for them to be denied that opportunity. Like, I'm by no means an E-Town fan as a LaRue County graduate. I'll tell you that. But that doesn't mean that I'm happy that they get robbed, most likely, of this chance to see what this team could do against the 15 other region champions around the state. It's a bummer. It really is. And it's, we joke about not having sports now for 3 days, but it's a weird sort of vacuous time in America. Like, there's just a big void, because sports are so much of the conversation when you're trying really hard not to talk about politics or religion or all the other things we wind up arguing about. You have sports, and now we don't have that void, or we have this big void where sports used to be.
In which there's still arguments about sports, but it seems like a lot of cases they're more civil.
Yeah, well, there's some truth to. I don't know, man. I've seen some really irrational sports arguments over the last couple days. My favorite being the Florida State Legislature voting 37-2, I think it was, to declare Florida State the 2020 NCAA basketball national champions. We could go all day about weird sports arguments, but you don't notice how important this kind of stuff is until you don't have it. Like, if you had told me, at some point in your life, they're going to cancel everything you care about in the months of March and April from a sports standpoint because of a disease, I'd have been like, no, that's ridiculous. That'll never happen. And now here we are, and I'm just trying to figure out, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to talk about?
And here in Kentucky, basically the Kentucky Super Bowl, the Kentucky Derby, how does that impact Derby Day coming up in May? Does it extend that far out? How long does this exist? Is it going to be the question?
The CDC, and this is what I've read on the internet, which do with it what you will. The CDC has recommended not gathering in groups of more than 50 for the next 8 weeks. So we lose Derby, in theory. I don't even think about Derby from a sport standpoint anymore, because I think horse racing is a weird thing to get into from a sport standpoint. Mm-hmm. But from an economic standpoint, we're already seeing, with the restaurant bans, people worrying, I work in a restaurant, how am I going to make this money? And Derby accounts for a huge chunk of Louisville businesses yearly operating income, restaurants and bars and hotels and
well, you think about the waiters and waitresses who depend on tips.
Yeah, and you think about the people who work at Churchill Downs. You see, I think it's really awesome. One of the things that I think we focus on the negative a lot when we talk about stuff like this. Kevin Love giving $500,000 to make sure all the arena workers in Cleveland are paid. A bunch of the other guys that play for teams, I know there's been others. He's the one that sticks out. Zion Williamson giving money out of his paycheck. That's awesome. Churchill Downs and the Kentucky Derby doesn't have a Kevin Love or a Zion Williamson. So there's thousands of people who rely on this money that suddenly don't have jobs. I said it before and I'll say it again. I'm not scared about what's happening. I'm a 30-year-old man in reasonably decent health. If I caught this thing, it wouldn't probably be the end for me, but I have to think about other people. but I'm less scared of the virus than I am just confused about what the world looks like 8 weeks from now, because of how much everything will have changed in 8 weeks. Like, we don't think about, it's not an apocalyptic event. Like, I feel like we're all going to survive, knock on wood. But what does the world look like 8 weeks from now? Because I can tell you what my 401k looks like, or not my 401k, my RRA looks like right now, and it's a bummer. Like, I don't want to think about it. But 8 more weeks of that, like, what is ever, like, how do all these people that are suddenly out of work, like, this is veering way off of sports and into, like, social conversation, but what does the sports world look like? What does our world in general look like after 8 weeks of, quarantining ourselves? That's where my head is, I guess, right now.
I guess we'll just have to take it, as they say, day by day, and figure it all out along the way and see how it all works out. Zach Newton joining us here on Heartland Sports Live. Joined me during the 5th Region Boys Basketball Tournament. I guess in closing for this segment, real quick, Zach, I guess what's the one thing that you will remember most about this year's 5th Region Tournament?
I had so much, like, pure childish fun. Like, there's a shortage of that when you get to be an adult, like, just doing something that you love for the love of it. Like, even if you have a job that you really like doing, it's still your job and you do it every day. Like, I got to just moonlight for a week doing something that I'd wanted to do since I was a little kid. I had a blast doing it. You're not going to pry me out of the chair at John Harden full time, but I will always come back whenever, my schedule allows, to call games. I'll be like your Doris Burke from time to time. Just show up when it works out. I had a blast. I think that especially over the next few weeks, not to keep being heavy, have fun doing something, even if it's just walking your dog or playing with your kids. Like, find little bits of dumb, childish fun. Because it's something we don't do enough when there's not a whole lot going on in the world. I had a blast. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks to the ESPN Radio 106.1 and all you guys for taking a chance on a guy you didn't really know, other than you'd sat behind me at some John Harden games. I had a great time.
And we should do a great job at those as well.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Well, that will do it for this segment. I'll come back and wrap up the show. Zach Newton, he is the PA guy, does the work for football, boys basketball at John Harden High School. Zach, appreciate you coming in and talking some hoops with me.
My pleasure, man.
When we come back, we're going to wrap up the show, and really not any other sports to talk about at this point. So we'll just try to make some stuff up in the third segment today. It's Heartland Sports Live on 106.1 ESPN Radio. Glad you're hanging out with us. And welcome back into Heartland Sports Live on 106.1 ESPN Radio, 1400 AM, and we are live streaming this afternoon with ESPN Radio 1061.com. I want to thank once again Ryan Lemon for talking to me in segment 1 from Kentucky Sports Radio. Of course, it has been a strange past few days here for us, and now that there's no NCAA tournament, there's no, as of right now, no high school KHSAA tournament coming up this week for the boys' side, Sweet 16, no XFL, no NASCAR, no, Major League Baseball's pushed back their start date a couple of weeks, no NBA season. You think about college with the NCAA. Baseball, of course, not going to be having their College World Series with their announcement coming last week. It has been a crazy last several days, and I want to thank Zach Newton, who joined me during the 5th Region Boys Basketball Tournament, who did a phenomenal job, by the way. He came in here with no experience at all doing play-by-play or color commentary, and he took on the analyst role, and he ran with it and did a phenomenal job for us here on 106.1 ESPN Radio during the entire 5th Region Boys Basketball Tournament. So I want to thank him for joining me for all those games down in Campbellsville at Taylor County High School, which I got to say, that venue, Thomas Nelson High School as well, both beautiful facilities, great hosts this year, and next year the tournaments, the hosts, they're going to have some expectations they're going to have to meet, because this year was pretty solid. Of course, Thomas Nelson on the north side of Bardstown, and then Taylor County High School on the north side of Campbellsville. So 2 great hosts this year, great tournaments, and now we just got to wait to see when we can enjoy sports once again, because this has been a weird last several days, including over the weekend, where you go into it, usually you're anticipating or expecting to watch some big games and catch up on some action, and there's no highlights, there's no big plays that you can go back and rewatch, no major events, no upsets, nothing. So if you're a sports fan heading into this last weekend, you're having to find other things to do. For example, maybe go outside. I know a lot of us do that typically anyway, but for a lot of us who like to sit around and watch sports, or maybe not have to figure out what we have to do, maybe got our head start on the spring cleaning thing. Of course, spring coming up later this week. Maybe you got a head start on that. Maybe you spent more time with the family and did some things. I don't know. Maybe you went outside and played catch. Thinking about baseball season coming up, where eventually we'll get to that stage where we are going to be playing some baseball. Of course, we are Cincinnati Reds affiliates. We'll be carrying all of the games here on 106.1 ESPN Radio throughout the spring and summer. And with that said, the start of the season, opening day, pushed back a couple of weeks. So now we got to wait even longer to see the Cincinnati Reds and what we expect, in which you look at all the offseason moves that organization made. You would think coming into this season, they're going to be one of the front runners in the National League Central. Can they get to the postseason? Can they get off to a strong start? That's been the main concern with this Reds team, is they either get off to a really strong start and then May comes around and they struggle, or they get off to a slow start to rattle off a few victories, and then they start to, dissipate. They start to fall apart as we get deeper into spring, closer to summertime. So maybe this year we'll get off to a strong start and then consistently build upon the success we've already played at. And, when it's all said and done, you have the Reds punching their ticket in for the postseason. Eventually we'll get there. In fact, I read one thing that's saying that they may try to make up all of these games and such. And then, baseball season already goes pretty late. But could you imagine the season being extended to the point that we may be playing games into late November, early December? That would be insane. I don't think they're going to do that. I have a feeling we may double up on some games on certain days to kind of make up for, because they still want to play 162 games. Major League Baseball does. Wouldn't that be insane, though, to see baseball with snowflakes flying? We've already kind of seen that in places like Colorado, for example, with the Rockies. But other places where you could be playing some cold baseball games that isn't of course, the typical World Series type games. That would be insane. I don't think we're going to do that. I do think that we may have a later start time for the postseason for Major League Baseball. But I don't see them extending. I have a feeling they may double up on some games, and so we'll have a lot of days this spring and summer where we may have 2 baseball games, the 2 teams facing each other once earlier in the day and then once in the evening. We may see that scenario play out. We'll just have to find out and see, though, as now we have a couple extra weeks to think about it, because opening day, of course, pushed back a couple of weeks from their March 26th start date, I think, to back April 10th or somewhere around there is where they're looking at getting things going, or April 9th coming up here in a couple of weeks, here in a few weeks, I should say. So we'll have to see if when these things, of course, we're still learning more with this whole coronavirus thing on how exactly everybody's going to handle this, because obviously schools here in Kentucky have suspended school pretty much for a couple of weeks. Plus, they have spring break, so basically 3 weeks where the kids won't be back in school. And then the NCAA, for example, shutting down all of its basically spring sports and bringing that to a halt real quick. So, and then plus, I mean, we're not talking about the tournaments. What does that mean moving forward for events? I mean, you look at wrestling, you have WrestleMania coming up. Are they going to cancel that? You have a feeling they have to, because a majority of their crowd for WrestleMania is typically outside audience, meaning people from other countries. So you have a feeling Vince McMahon is going to have to cancel that. We already saw one of WWE shows with no fans on Friday Night SmackDown this past week. So that would be weird to have WrestleMania at a big, huge venue, and then you only have, the essential people you need on staff. The Kentucky Derby, what does that mean moving forward for that coming up in May? The NFL Draft, all these other things that we look forward to, how are they going to be impacted? And we're just going to have to wait and find out. Time, unfortunately, is going to take a little bit longer than I think we anticipate to get to these events. Typically, I mean, the days kind of fly by, but with no sporting events, this is going to be a long few weeks here for us sports fans. And I don't know if I like it. So we're gonna come back next Monday, 5 until 6, and figure out what we're gonna talk about. Maybe I'll have some more guests lined up to try to kill some time and figure out what's going on in this world. I'm Trevor Rice. Thank you so much for joining me on Heartland Sports Live. I'll be back with you next Monday, 5 until 6. Thank you once again to Ryan Lemon and Zach Newton for joining me this hour. You have a fantastic, I'd say, sports week, as I always do, but let's be honest, there's no sports this weekend. So just enjoy time with your family and friends. Maybe go outside, play some catch, and think about when you're playing Madden or one of those other sporting events, sporting games, I should say, that, just set it to automatically go. Like, have the computers face each other and pretend like you're watching an actual game. And I guess you can live in the moment then a little bit. It's Heartland Sports Live on 106.1 ESPN Radio.